SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Discover Covington County Hospital's swing bed program, offering comprehensive care for patients transitioning from acute hospital care to home. With a focus on rehabilitation, we ensure a smooth journey back to your home environment. Choose Covington County Hospital, where your health care matters.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to Midday SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy, howdy.
All right, what in the world is going on today? The answer is a bunch is going on. I'm watching the Dow, and I'm telling you, wow, that little first intro part of Separate Ways, one of the greatest Journey songs ever recorded that launches our show, was playing. The Dow jumped around the unchanged line about 3 times. The old kangaroo hopping around. It's presently down 6 points. It was down rather sharply earlier in today's trading. The NASDAQ, it's actually in the green today. The funny money, 84,000. It's up a bit. The S&P in the green. The price of oil still remains rather stubbornly stuck around $70 a barrel. That's because tomorrow, according to the president, $71 today. Price of oil is going up. According to the president, tomorrow is Liberation Day. That's when we can expect to see some big-time tariffs go into place, and it just depends on what side of that situation you're on as to whether or not you think that's a good thing. Market's still just uncertain, unclear, unsure, and the president really has not revealed any amount of tremendous detail. He says he's settled on, quote, his Liberation Day tariff plan, but he has not revealed it. I've settled, yeah. He said that in the Oval Office last night when asked whether he has decided on his Liberation Day plans. That's what he's called them. His team is pitching several ideas of how to tariff other countries, including a 20% global tariff on virtually all imports, not just automobiles, but all imports. Now, keep in mind again, American companies pay tariffs. Foreign countries do not. American companies remit tariff impositions to the federal government, to the Department of Treasury, just like you pay your taxes to the IRS. Well, if you're importing goods from other countries which are subject to the tariffs, you, as the importer, the American company, you pay that tariff. Now, you obviously can choose. Pass that on to the customer, absorb it, combination of the two. One thing for sure, it's likely to cause prices of many goods in this country to increase. Now, a more universal rate would be more in alignment with the attempt to rebalance global trade in this country. We presently import about $3 trillion, and I think we export about half of that last time I checked. So about $3 trillion. Now, the Trump administration says that these tariffs could generate about $600 billion a year of revenue to the Treasury. Again, that would be money paid by American importers. An automobile manufacturer, for example, who imports vehicles that they made by factories they own in other countries. That would be an example. And then they're going to pass that on, generally speaking. It's at their discretion. They don't have to. But they'll pass that on to their retail partners, the car dealers you buy your cars from. So the expectation is that we're going to see a significant increase in the price of new vehicles for starters. It was Peter Navarro. He advises the president, serves as the chief trade advisor in the White House. He says this will raise $6 trillion of taxes from the tariffs. Quote, taxes are going to raise about $600 billion a year, about $6 trillion over a 10-year period. That's what he told Fox News on Sunday. This is on top of $100 billion a year from Mr. Trump's car and truck tariffs. I've been unable to make that math work to the $100 billion, however. So he's been trying to message that these tariffs essentially amount to tax cuts. I can't make that work either. Not sure where he's getting that from. But this is interesting. Over the weekend, we had these massive Tesla protests. There were some real doozies. It's almost kind of sad.
You mean the ones where they packed up and left all at the same time at the top of the hour because they were all paid to be there? Like, there's literally a video of them up. It's noon.
Unbelievable.
Back up, walk away.
So the shift is done, right? Clock out. Oh, my gosh. The FBI has announced numerous incidents targeting Teslas across the country. And one of those happened close to home here, Brookhaven, Mississippi. The Brookhaven Police Department, they're investigating what amounts to a felony vandalism charge. It will be, if they can locate this individual. This was some fool in the Walmart parking lot just vandalizing the hood on the driver's side of a Tesla. Osvaldo Torres Rodriguez, 63, a Cuban male, not even a U.S. citizen. Does that just not gall you? I mean, it's bad enough we got to deal with crimes committed by American citizens, but when they're not citizens in this country, immediately I think, well, what the heck are they doing here? They're doing zero productive. We don't want you if you're not going to contribute and assimilate and obey the law. And, of course, he has an active felony arrest warrant. Are we surprised? No. 63 years old, caught on video. But Tesla dealerships, vehicles, and charging stations have faced these attacks. That's ever since Elon Musk, of course, he's the CEO, founder of Tesla. He started in his White House role to identify wasteful spending and root it out of government. That happened over the weekend. You're right. A lot of it looked awfully staged to me and contrived, and now you're saying paid for, right? Which is crazy. And some of them are, it reminds me of the Summer of Love, the BLM riots and protests, which were anything but protests, peaceful protests. Who could forget the old CNN reporter with buildings ablaze in the background? It's peaceful. Well,
all is well.
Exactly. It's the old captain of the Titanic. And they're saying, well, this is perfectly fine. We're not hurting anyone. These are just property, just cars. That can be replaced. File it on your insurance. I mean, that's literally the mindset of these fools. That's what they think. They're justifying criminal activity, vandalism, property theft, and destruction on the guys that it's just property. Well, how about we just destroy your personal property there, Toots? Unbelievable. It's
just a black eye. It's a bruise. It'll go away.
Oh, exactly. So disgusting.
Would they be fine with me just hauling off and smacking them for being stupid?
Man, it's so maddening watching that. But the good news is the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, ain't having none of it. She's made it very clear. You commit these crimes, we're coming after you. You will pay the consequences.
Unless your name's on the Epstein list.
It does seem to be that way. There was a 70-year-old protester. You saw this one as well.
How pathetic does one's life have to be to reach the age of 70 to go protest Elon Musk?
Meridian, Idaho, drove his car into a counter-protester, a pro-Tesla individual, 49-year-old man, hit the man with his car at the dealership Saturday, that according to the Meridian, Idaho Police Department.
You notice most of these Tesla incidents involve older idiots.
I have, and I don't get
They don't have an excuse of being young and stupid.
That's
they're
true.
Old enough to know better, and they're still that stupid.
The victim was transported to a hospital on his own accord, did it himself. Michael Watson, Secretary of State at 11:05, Lieutenant Governor Hosemann at 12:05. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
We're rolling. Middays with Gerard Gibert. What? This is so awesome. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Stop your instincts. Can you man your thought control, sir? Can you give the last command or lie to a good soldier? I'm a doubter, I'm a fool, I am but a man. Cast me out on let
We are back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Of course, you know, up there in Washington, they're trying to pass, just like we are here in Mississippi, a budget. Right now in Washington, we're under a continuing resolution that just continues spending at the level it has been before that was passed a couple of weeks ago, and that extends it out through September. So they got a little breathing room, but of course that's not doing anything to address deficit spending at the federal level. So they're busy devising the details of a budget resolution, which would, of course, incorporate tax policy, especially with the big Trump tax cuts scheduled to expire at the end of this year, and then it would include spending, appropriations. The president, of course, wants one big, beautiful bill that would extend the expiring tax cuts, implement those tax cuts which he discussed numerous times on the campaign trail. That would be the exemption of Social Security income, overtime, and tips from federal taxation. Also wants more money, more spending for border security and defense. Kind of makes you wonder where the cut's going to come from. We're out of things to cut if we're extending or increasing spending on those two areas. Now, Republican senators are talking about significant spending cuts, around $2 trillion over a decade, $200 billion a year. But they're not really looking at locking in on that. They're just trying to create a framework for additional debate. One of the things that did bother, there's been some discussion of how to get these new tax cuts the president would like to see. Social Security, tips, overtime, they're looking at increasing the top tax rate from where it stands today. Increasing. Now, this would be in exchange for exempting from taxation those three categories of income. I completely oppose this and think this would be devastating for the Republican Party. I understand the president talked about this a lot on the campaign trail. He wants to get that done. They got to figure out another way. Raising taxes, I don't care if it's only on the top incomes, would have a negative impact on the economy. I'm 100% convinced of that. And it's just still, it's a tax increase. It represents raising taxes. And it's a bad idea. It's a bad move. And I hope they back off on it. Now, right now, all eyes are focused on the Senate parliamentarian, arguably the most powerful person in the country right now. The parliamentarian is the one individual who will determine and score the legislation to determine if it can be passed with a simple majority. Because if it requires a supermajority, 60 votes in the Senate, it's not happening. Democrats, 7 would be needed, are not going to join all 53 Republicans. Assume they vote for it. And Senator Rand Paul is tenuous at best on whether or not he will support this measure. So the parliamentarian has all the power. What the GOP is trying to do is count extending the tax cuts. This is crazy, Rhino, when you think about it. Extending what we have today, what's in place today, is considered, for purposes of scoring the legislation by the parliamentarian, a decrease in revenue. Even though it keeps it exactly where it is. There's really no decrease in the tax structure. But they would compare it to the tax structure prior to 2017. And so the Republicans are working with the parliamentarian to essentially count the extensions as cost-free, if you will. And it's a procedural move, and they want to make the tax cuts permanent, and I completely support that. The Democrats, of course, are saying this is magic math. And they are really...
In fairness, all math appears to be magic to them. It's too complicated for them to do simple stuff, let alone the complex stuff.
So true. And, of course, they're warning that the extension of the current tax environment, which is, because of the way it's scored, requires significant spending cuts. And when you're increasing discretionary spending in the form of defense and border security, you got to tap into the mandatory spending. Well, it's Medicaid. Man, that's the big one on the books. We've talked about it many times. And there's concerns among Republicans. Senator Jim Justice of West Virginia, he's warning about potential Medicaid cuts and how that would affect his state. So here you have a Republican senator that is seeking to preserve the massive welfare program and all the money that flows into it. So there's some internal divisions. Senators Josh Hawley from Missouri, Senator Ron Johnson. Senator Josh Hawley joins with Jim Justice. Senators Rick Scott and Ron Johnson. Rick Scott from Wisconsin, Ron Johnson. They want deeper spending cuts, which means more Medicaid reductions. And this is the necessary action, it is believed at this point. It's all contingent on how the parliamentarian scores it, working with the CBO to get this legislation through with a simple majority. So that's where we are. In the meantime, nobody knows. And that's obviously rattling the markets as well, because I really would like to see the president focus more on getting these tax cuts, the existing tax environment in place. Give us some breathing room, some assurance That's done. That's good. Rather than right now focusing on tariffs. I know that he's a big fan of tariffs. He believes that is a key tool in his toolbox to grow the country's economy and to spur the reshoring of manufacturing into the country. Of course, the other countries, they're all announcing we got new tariffs coming in response. So I guess we got ourselves a good old-fashioned tariff war going on. We'll just see how that's going to affect the economy. But everybody should be aware that tomorrow is when reciprocal tariffs will start with all countries. All countries is what he said yesterday. Initially, he said all countries. Then he kind of rolled that back somewhat, said maybe selected. The markets, you remember, reacted positively. But yesterday he said, no, it's universal across the board. And he said he couldn't care less if auto prices rise because of his tariffs. Really interesting dynamics going on there. Let's see what we got on the text line. Let's see here, going back to when we started. Kevin in Monticello, if the liberals get their feelings hurt by accident, they don't want us actually trying to. Are these two of the Tesla protesters? When Rhino was talking about they're paid, and I said, yeah, they're clocking out. You said they all picked up and leave when their shift was ended. And that's... I can't remember the character's name from the old cartoon.
Wile E. Coyote.
I get Wile E. Coyote, but I can't remember the name of the dog there that's behind him in the photo.
Was it Ralph?
Yeah, I think that's right. Just clocking out. That's absolutely
It's
true.
Ralph or Sam. It was some
seems like that's
simple
right.
name.
Because they talk to each other like they're workers, on the job, do the coyote and the dog. That's kind of funny.
No, wait, it was Ralph Wolf
Okay.
and Wile E. Coyote. There are two slight differences. It wasn't really Wile E. Coyote. It was Ralph Wolf and Sam Sheepdog.
Oh, okay. Sam the sheepdog.
So that's where Ralph came from.
Okay, got you. Wasn't it Theodore Roosevelt who said immigrants were welcome in the U.S. as long as they assimilate to our ways? We are doing just the opposite by bending over backwards to assimilate to immigrants. That's Louis from the 662. I mean, you can lay that blame squarely at the feet of the Democrats, Louis. This was all their plan, their idea. It was all to get voters. And now we've learned that, yeah, they're able to get Social Security numbers, which are extremely easy to get, by the way. And once you get that, let's be honest, lots of these states look the other way when one registers to vote. Don't check that they're an American citizen. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Attention, adoring fans!
It's time for Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back to the Element Wealth studio. It's middays. Well, it's election day. That's why we got Secretary of State Michael Watson coming on. Municipal elections across the Magnolia State today. But there are some key races in other states as well that are captivating political junkies in really both parties. And perhaps the one most in focus is a Supreme Court race in the battleground state of Wisconsin. Really a perennial purple state, if you will. Is this a proxy for the president and Elon Musk? Elon Musk was there this weekend with a cheese head on there, and he was addressing of course, those in the cheese state of Wisconsin, and handing out money as well. Now, the Supreme Court did rule that his financial inducements were not actually considered payment to vote a certain way, but rather just to participate in the process. This is interesting. He gave out a couple of $1 million checks, didn't he, Rhino? I think to the crowd there, to the lucky winners. It's sort of ingenious what he's doing to just encourage people to get out and vote. He handed out the checks at a rally in Green Bay. That was Sunday. That's when he had the cheesehead hat on. And I'm looking at a photo of him with one of the big $1 million checks going out at this America PAC town hall. This is in advance of the Supreme Court race. Now, what really is so telling about this Supreme Court race? $80 million is being invested. Now, it's probably higher than that. This was over the weekend because there's been a last-minute surge of spending leading up to today. So the last couple of days could have been another 10 or 15 million, honestly. 80 million on a state Supreme Court race. And it's not partisan, right? They're not affiliated with a party, the candidates, but one is clearly liberal and one is clearly conservative. And this race is decisive from kind of a balance. You can't say balance of power. Let's say a balance of philosophy among the justices in the Wisconsin Supreme Court, on the Supreme Court, the highest court, of course, in the state. And there's some key issues that are coming before the Supreme Court. One deals with abortion. And so both left and right contributors and organizations are dumping millions, tens of millions. I'm just shocked by it. $80 million. Heck, a U.S. Senate race in big states is $100 million to $150 million affair now. Wasn't Pennsylvania, it seems like, Rhino, over $200 million? I mean, set the record for it. Which, again, anytime I see these crazy numbers, I immediately think we've vested too much power in government. It shouldn't matter that much, is the point. If we all adhere to the principles, the values, the vision of our founders, our founding documents, this wouldn't be that big a deal. But when you're dumping $80 million in a Supreme Court race, man, you just got to step back and say, what in the world's going on here? And then you got two special elections in Florida due to vacated seats that were vacated by members who were called up to serve in the Trump administration. One, I guess, resigned in Matt Gaetz, right, Rhino? And then we've got Mike Waltz, the other one. Waltz. Let me make sure I pronounce it correctly there. So those two are also in high view today to see what happens, and they're toss-ups. And those are in districts that went pretty significantly for the president in 24 in the election. But a lot of eyes focused on those races. Of course, the president has endorsed both Republican candidates. And this is so critical because of how it could not only affect the balance of power in the House, even if Republicans are able to prevail and retain those seats. If they didn't, that'd make things a lot more difficult in the House. Where are we now? 218, 215, I think, is what the balance is. So you can see how that would change things. Man, that's complicated. But it also could serve as a harbinger of the 26 midterms. And that's what people are looking at. Often you have races such as this in the Supreme Court race, and they are considered a bit of a proxy for someone who just got elected, in this case, President Trump, to the White House. You know, it would be a reflection of feelings and sentiments of his performance thus far. Of course, the midterms are always considered a referendum, if you will, on the current administration in the White House. And then typically, throughout history, the party who is seated in the White House loses control, if they have control, in the House. Usually what happens. Not sure that'll be the case here. Of course, the Republicans did just that in 22 when they flipped the House. But it wasn't by a lot. It was expected to be a huge red wave, and it kind of fizzled out, and it did secure the majority for them. But it's still, though, the balance of power is fairly close. But, man, look at it now, the balance of power. 3 seats? Incredible. Lose one is all you can lose from a voting perspective, because a tie does not pass legislation. So that's going on today, and this is going to be the big-time national news tonight. Of course, here at home, we got local races, the city of Jackson. All those who live in the city of Jackson who aren't running for mayor, please raise your hand. I think that's a shorter. Rhino has responded.
I'm not running for Jackson.
Okay. You know what I'm saying here, though. It's a pretty long list of candidates. The incumbent, Mayor Chokwe Labamba, expected to advance at least to, and this is just an expectation, nothing more or less, to a runoff. Might Senator John Horn, who's been in this studio many times on this program, also in the race as a candidate for mayor of the city of Jackson, our capital city, might he join him in a runoff? Don't know. From a Democratic primary. There are a number of Republican candidates as well, and independents. So pretty interesting situation going on there in the Magnolia State, around the state, in the municipal elections. Mississippi Secretary of State Michael Watson at 11:05 to give us an update. But watching all this unfold across the country is obviously fascinating, and a lot of good stuff for us political junkies. Paul in Meridian sent us a text, wanted to kind of weigh in on the income tax elimination bill that passed into law last Thursday. Big ceremony at the governor's mansion for that rather monumental event. He's done, Rhino, what you and I have done and shared with the audience many times. He did what we asked, and that's a good thing, Paul. I respect and appreciate that. He did the math. He said, I looked at what I spent on gas and how many gallons I use, and I looked at what I spent on groceries, and I did the net, which is what you need to do, because under this bill, yes, the excise tax on gas, on fuel, is increasing, but the sales tax on groceries is decreasing. So there has tended to be a focus only on the former. Wouldn't you say, Rhino? There's a lot of focus and highlighting of, wow, they're raising the excise tax on gas, but no consideration for the decrease in the sales tax on groceries. And my gosh, we've heard calls for that for a while, significant. So, yeah, Paul,
it's almost like nothing's ever good enough for the naysayers.
I wonder that as well. So, Paul, there's one small mistake. Actually, it's more than a small mistake, and I'm not trying to jump on you here. You use 15 cents. Okay, it's 9 cents. So 15 cents, stay with me here. The original House bill, original HB1, was a 5% sales tax. They amended that to be a 15-cent excise tax. What passed was the Senate's version, which was a 9-cent excise tax. So you'd have to rework your math, but you estimated a savings of $195 a year. It turns out, I did the math real quick in my head. I think it's about $241. Check me on that if you replace the 15 cents with 9 cents based on your usage, the number of gallons you say you buy a year. But, yeah, that's the way to do it. Let's see. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
We are back in the Element Wealth studio. Tomorrow, middays, we'll be at the Trade Mart in Jackson for the Build Mississippi Students Skills event. Students from all over the state will be competing in trades and skills. Mississippi is leading the way in developing a future construction workforce. And this event is where hard work, training, and talent come together to showcase the future of the construction industry. The C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. It is open. Don't forget to go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. All the indexes in the green now, Rhino. Bitcoin even up a bit as well. The Dow up some 60 points. The S&P 23. The NASDAQ 152. Little recovery going on there. And the price of oil, though, still a little worrisome. Sitting at, it's down a bit, 9 cents, $71. On the C Spire text line, Paul said Grok led me astray. His calculation, no big deal, Paul. But you're right. It's even better. Little better savings. Here's one that I think reflects broad sentiment in the state. And here we go. Not that I'm a naysayer, but it just seems like the citizens of Mississippi have to wait so long to see a savings from our income tax, but are having to immediately pay more for gasoline. Then we have to wait a certain time frame to see any savings on groceries. Am I wrong on that? Yeah, let's be clear. The excise tax on fuel begins to rise this July at the rate of 3 cents per gallon per year, over 3, for a total of 9 cents per gallon, which will go into effect July 1, 2027. First full year, you'll pay 9 cents a gallon, will be the calendar year 28. But at the same time, the sales tax on groceries decreases by 2 percentage points from 7 to 5, also effective this July. So this coming July, here's what's going to happen. Your sales tax on groceries goes to 5%. That's what you're going to see at the cash register. The price of gas, you won't notice it because the price of gas is so volatile, but embedded in that price of gas will be an additional 3 cents per gallon excise tax. So you will actually get a couple of years of full savings on groceries before you are required to pay the entire full 9 cents per gallon increase on gas.
Meanwhile, that whole time your income tax rate is going down. That's
right. So keep this in mind as well. In 2022, tax reform legislation was passed, which eliminated the 5% bracket, the 4% bracket in 2023. And then it starts to decrease the 5% bracket. Started last year, 24, tax year 24, went to 4.7. This year, 4.4. Next year, 4. So think of it this way. Between 24, think about your taxes in 24, and the taxes you will pay in 26, based on the 26 year, there's a 30% decrease in the tax rate. That's already going into effect right now. It's in progress. 4.7 for tax year 24, 4 for tax year 26. So that's a 30% decrease, slightly more than that. So that's pretty significant. And then after that, in small increments of 0.3% per year, to take it down to 3%. So between now and 2030, you're looking at a significant decrease in the tax rate, 30%. Between now and 27, it's a little under 20%. Bottom line is, as Rhino points out, income taxes are decreasing. We just don't get to zero until 2040. But they are decreasing. And also bear in mind, that has no effect on retirees whose principal income, if not all their income, is exempt from income tax. But going from 5 in 23 to 4 in 26, is a 20% decrease already in progress. And then in the succeeding 4 years, another 25% decrease down to 3%. A lot of numbers there, I know. The bottom line is income taxes are steadily decreasing at the same time this legislation goes into effect, which is going to decrease your sales tax on groceries and slightly increase your excise tax on fuel. So it's like Paul did. You really got to sit down and do the math and look at how much do I spend on groceries, how many gallons do I consume a year, and you got to apply the changes to that to see where you land. My guess is most people will find it's a net savings when they consider the amount of gas they use versus the amount of groceries they buy. There could be some unusual circumstances where you really travel a lot, but other than that, I think you'll see a net decrease. We're taking a break for Fox News SuperTalk News. Secretary of State Michael Watson next.
Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transition now.
Now on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays. We are live from the Element Wealth Studio. We're pleased to welcome now the Secretary of State of the great state of Mississippi, Secretary Michael Watson. Mr. Secretary, big election day. Give us the scoop. What's going on, man? Good to see you.
Same to you, and I always appreciate you having me on, especially on election days, just to continue to get the word out. As I've told everybody, look, this is such an important day because the municipal elections are really the ones that impact your lives every single day, whether it's garbage pickup, whether it's police, firefighters, infrastructure, you name it. This is a very important day for not only our cities, but our state as a whole, because we've got to have vibrant cities to make sure that our state continues to progress the way it's going right now. So not too much out there so far. We've heard a couple of different issues, but nothing big that really bothers me. No election day is perfect. You're going to have small issues from time to time. So really appreciate the folks that are out there doing the hard work of running these elections. We've got probably 10 to 15 folks out around the state. Many times we get phone calls with different elections, counties, cities, you name it. Today it's cities, where they say, look, we've heard some interesting things. We'd like to have you and have somebody with the eyes on the ground. So we'll have people out in various cities going from precinct to precinct, making sure the law is being followed. So we don't just talk about election integrity, Gerard. We actually enforce election integrity. So hopefully this will be a great day.
Yeah. So is there anything sort of unique about any of the races across the state? Like it's my understanding in the city of Madison, for example, that there are no opponents challenging incumbents who are all running, and therefore it's their prerogative not to conduct an election since there's only one candidate on the ballot for each office. Is that true?
Right. They could have dispensed with these elections. An interesting point here, Pascagoula actually had that issue, and the candidate, which would have won, passed away. And they had not dispensed with the election. So then it becomes a write-in campaign. So there are some different laws and different things that can happen. This one specifically took place down in Pascagoula. So my hometown, and another reason why it's important for us to have open lines of communication with our local election officials. Some were kind of concerned, what exactly do we do now? So that's when we step in and advise them, hey, here's what the statute says. Here's how you should conduct this election moving forward. And then we answer questions for constituents as well who have those certain issues in their cities and want to know exactly what's going on. So, yeah, there are issues like that can take place, and they can dispense with those elections if they so choose.
Okay, gotcha. Anything about the polling locations, change in precincts people need to be aware of? I know I live in a district where my municipal voting location is different than all the other elections.
That's right. Look, our My Election Day tool is very important. We get that information from the counties and cities themselves, so you can locate your polling precinct. What I would tell you is, though, most importantly, is make sure you're checking in with your local elected officials. For instance, I know Moss Point recently moved to the combined precinct model, where they are all at Pelican Landing now, so you won't go to a different precinct. Everyone is held in that. I think Louisville's the same. I think Oxford's the same. So you got some different municipalities that now contain their municipal elections in one building. Some are going to have the same precincts they had before. We've had a couple of call-ins of precincts open a little bit late. So, again, you're going to have some of those issues on Election Day. But most importantly, call your municipal clerks if you've got questions about the precinct, if we've changed, where do I need to go. And then you're always free to call us at the Secretary of State's office. I want to make sure people understand we'll always be that backstop. We'll always answer your questions and make sure you have the information you need.
Gotcha. Let's talk a little bit about what's coming out of Washington, the president signing an executive order that essentially requires what it seems like we already have, which is you got to be a citizen to register and vote in this country. I'm sure your office has been all over this. How would that affect, Mr. Secretary, the registration process in Mississippi and perhaps even the voting process?
Yeah, so we've had this conversation a couple of times. I've seen some of it on social media, whether you come in with proof of residence or proof of citizenship, you name it. One of the first things that we did, and you'll recall back on the 2019 campaign trail, I talked about making sure that only United States citizens were voting in our elections. That wasn't just a topic because it was popular back then. Not a lot of folks were talking about it as much back then as they are now. That was because I believed in that. And so we got the legislature to put that into law, finally passing the last piece of that back in 2023. Is now fully implemented. So every individual that registers to vote in Mississippi will have their information bounced off a security database, and it says, hey, this person may be a citizen or may be a non-citizen. And if that's the case, they're flagged. They have an opportunity to come in and prove their citizenship on the back end within 30 days from their circuit clerk's office. So that's everybody. It's not just, hey, we think this person may be a non-citizen or that person may be. Every single person goes through these background checks. So I think it's really important for Mississippians to know. The legislature also gave us a year to go through the entire voter roll database to make sure that all United States citizens were on our list. So we doing that this year, finishing up this year. So really excited about that as well. So yes, the executive order is, in my opinion, is kind of common sense. There are some things in there that I will say, Gerard, look, just like the last administration, state level is where elections should be dealt with. There are some issues, small issues that the federal government can play with legislatively with federal elections, but not state elections themselves.
Right.
And so we got to be careful with that, making sure that the states still have the abilities to run their elections at the state level as opposed to the federal overreach. And I was in the White House last week and sat down with some folks there and told them, look, some of the concerns I'm hearing and some of the things that I'm reading sounds a little bit like the last administration with federal overreach. So let's be very careful with that. And they were very gracious and said, look, why don't you get some feedback from your secretaries around the country? I was just literally on the phone with secretaries from across the country about 15 minutes ago talking about this executive order, talking about some other things that have come out from the RNC. So we're working on that, and we're going to have our request into the president to have a round table. Let's talk about this on the front end before we get these DOs, and then we hear about it on the back end. And hopefully we can maybe better educate the White House and some of the other officials about the state level and how that works and why we think it's very important to maintain at that level.
I mean, you and I have had this discussion before. We already have a fairly robust process, do we not, to determine and ascertain that an individual registering to vote is a citizen. You check a couple of databases now, right? Do some cross-checking, maybe even 3 here in Mississippi. Talk to us about that.
Yes, we do several different things. Obviously, we have what's called DPS verified. So that's where the Department of Public Safety, we use some of their background checks as well. I've told you before, we're signing MOUs with different states as well. All of them in the Southeast so far, where we can check our database against their database. Again, if they've got some information that says this person may not be a citizen and then it bounces on our database, then we can see that as well. So we've got multiple areas to check. We also are recently, we had a process with the EAC that came in and did basically a pilot program with Experian, who collects, as you all know, commercial data.
Yeah.
And that's a new way that we're going to be looking at our voter rolls, which actually has more accurate information than the old way that we've been checking our voter rolls. So Mississippi is on the cutting edge, on the front end of a lot of these issues with making sure our voter rolls are clean. So really proud of the work we're doing.
Okay. Well, I think on our driver's licenses, I think Rhino looked up this a couple of weeks ago, you can get a driver's license, but it clearly states on the driver's license non-citizen license or something to that effect. So if somebody comes in, they present their driver's license, could that serve as evidence that they're a citizen? You're still going to do all the various checks. I get that. But do you have to show up now and say, okay, here's proof that I'm a citizen? Because I know you signed the affidavit, right, where you attest that I'm a citizen to some extent. That's got a little teeth in it.
Right. That's current law. They have to attest that they are a citizen. And then again, as I mentioned, we go through the security database checks. The real ID is an issue that we are seeing now. A lot of states are coming into compliance with. Again, that has a background check for citizen status. So if you've got that little star on your driver's license, that should prove your citizenship. But you're correct. You can. Some folks that are non-citizens can get a driver's license, but it says it on your driver's license. Actually, ask DPS, hey, I want to see a copy. I want to make sure that we can trust this. And so they sent me a picture of one. So that's going on as well. Again, I think there are so many eyes here in Mississippi, and it's been such an important topic for us for election integrity that Mississippi's in great shape when it comes to making sure the citizens are voting in our elections.
So not too much of an upheaval from this EO, but I share your concerns, and I'm glad, honestly, you voiced those to the administration that be careful here. We get what you're trying to do, but this is a purview for the state because, as you and I have talked about many times, the Democrats want just the opposite. They want to completely federalize, which would be a disaster, all elections. Integrity would be thrown out the window at that point.
And that's what I brought up to the White House. Look, are we getting to where every 4 years the pendulum's going to go this way and then that way and this way and that way? That's not good. That's not good for elections. It's not good for our country. So we want to make sure that we're staying within the bounds of the law, but also acting as good conservatives.
Got it. Mr. Secretary, appreciate you taking time out of this busy election day to check in with us. I'm sure we'll be talking soon, but let's have a good one. I know we will. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
That's right. Go get them. Thank you, sir.
We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Hey, this is...
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, on to the real part.
Dynamite! On SuperTalk Mississippi.
The hurt doesn't show, but the pain still grows. Some strangers to you and me. I can feel it coming in the air tonight.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We are live in the Element Well studio. We're grateful to the Secretary of State, Michael Watson, for checking in with us today, giving us an update on municipal elections across Magnolia State. That should be interesting to see the outcomes, some key races in some municipalities going on right now. Randy in Myrtle asks, is the 2% drop on grocery tax, does that include convenience stores or is it only at grocery stores? Yeah, it's a little misleading, I would say, Rhino, to describe it as a reduction of the sales tax on groceries. And here's why. It is defined as all those goods purchased that qualify for SNAP benefits. So the federal government publishes and constantly updates a manifest, if you will, a catalog of all goods down to a fairly specific level that qualify for SNAP, for food stamps. Anything that can be purchased with food stamps qualifies for this 2% decrease in sales taxes. And another question was, did the general sales tax get reduced as well? It did not. Only goods that qualify for SNAP. That's the way to think about it. Anything and anywhere you buy those, it doesn't matter if it's a convenience store, doesn't matter who the seller is. It's the sales tax applicable to those items is going to be 5% come July 1, 2025. That's what happened there. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, of course, is that municipalities receive a diversion of those taxes, of all sales taxes. That's one of the major sources of revenue to operate towns and cities in Mississippi. Counties do not. If you purchase something at the store presently, under present law, that is not within any city limits, but obviously is located outside of city limits, but inside the county, there is no diversion of the sales tax. You're still going to pay 7%, but and that's going to be remitted by the retailer to the state, but there's no diversion, no direction of the portion that currently goes back to cities. There is no such provision for counties. It's 18.5% of the total amount charged gets transferred back to counties, down to the counties. It's called a diversion, sales tax diversion. That's for most, not to counties, to cities, pardon me. For most cities, it's their primary source of revenue. Their other source of revenue is property taxes, their share of property taxes. But it depends on the city. If you got a lot of expensive property, well, likely most of their revenue comes from property taxes. If you don't have a big accessible base of property, then most of their revenue comes from sales taxes. Some of them, it's fairly close. It just varies from city to city. But the bottom line is that they rely on that to operate. So by reducing the sales tax on groceries, that's less being paid by citizens. That also means less being diverted back to municipalities. So in this law that just passed, not only is that somewhat of a hit to revenue to the state, but it's a hit to revenue to the cities. However, in the law, the state makes the cities whole. It, at least on the grocery sales taxes, because that's what's being reduced. That's about $73 million a year, last I checked, goes back to cities across the state for just the grocery sales tax diversion. Not all sales tax diversions, just grocery sales tax. To the state, that's and that's the full amount, by the way, the full diversion of the full amount. We're taking just a piece of it out here, going from 7 to 5, about a little less than 30% decrease in that. So that's, what, $23 million to the cities. And then the state, of course, generates about $315 million of income from sales taxes on groceries, and they're taking a 20% hit as well because of the reduction in the sales tax on groceries. So that's kind of the lay of the land with respect to the tax bill. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, Rhino, that and we see it on our text line, sure do wish that the state would address property taxes. Would you agree? You hear that a lot. People, yeah, we really wish they'd tackle property taxes. And on the other hand, you've heard a lot of people say, oh my gosh, they're getting rid of the income tax. That means my property taxes are going up. And neither are actually true, because they're completely separate sources of revenue that fund completely different levels of government.
I think part of the misunderstanding with both of those issues is, for some reason, people associate property tax with the sale of their home or land.
Oh, okay.
And believe that for whatever reason they are being unjustly taxed once they have paid off their house or land.
Okay. Well, property taxes, as you know, are not assessed on the sale.
Correct.
That would be a sales tax. This is a tax on the value of the property, the assessed value of the property, in accordance with whatever your county supervisors have established.
But the argument is, I've paid for this land. This land is mine. Why am I still paying taxes on it?
I get it. And look, there's a movement. You've seen it. In Florida and in Texas, both states without an income tax have fairly high property taxes. Texas, in particular, is roughly double what it is here in Mississippi. And both of those states have announced efforts to pare the property tax, if not fully eliminate it.
Because it's the main headwind they're facing for bringing any residential development commercial development, that's the one thing they're hearing from all those people saying, we don't want to come because it's just too high.
Right. It is high, and it is a deterrent, and as is insurance, at least in Florida. With all the storms they've had a marked increase in casualty insurance on property, and that's serving as a deterrent as well. These are issues that in the Florida legislature they're addressing. I noticed that Vivek Ramaswamy, former candidate for president, and originally part of the DOJ team, now a candidate for governor in Ohio.
Don't know how well he's going to do.
I don't either. But he is announcing.
Still seems to be paying the price for his Christmas meltdown.
Yeah, that was probably some ill-advised commentary, to say the least. He took shots at the American workforce, I think it's fair to say, and the quality of it and the dedication of the typical American worker. I get what he was trying to say, but it was completely misguided, what he said and the way he said it. I too share some concerns about some degree of entitlement itis sweeping the country. It's been going on for a long time. Didn't just start yesterday, and it doesn't matter left or right.
It's been generations in the making.
That's right. And I share his concerns there, but I think the way the language he used was in poor taste and just inarticulate. But I have noticed in his campaign materials, he is proposing to eliminate the state's income tax. He's fallen on that train, jumping on that train, as well as reduce or eliminate the property tax. I think this is great. But I'm just saying that I think that's a popular idea in Mississippi to address property taxes. One reason it's popular is because, as you point out, retired folks, many of whom own their property, don't pay income tax. So eliminating the income tax doesn't help them. Now, they get a little relief when you net the sales tax on groceries with the excise tax on fuel. But what they really would like to see done is to address the property taxes. The problem is all that money's at the local level. So if you want your property taxes to go down, go to your supervisors. That's where those decisions are made, your county supervisors. Talk to them about it. Is there a possible way? And I can tell you a quick way you can fix that. It won't be popular, likely. Increase the sales tax. Allow counties to keep sales taxes with the increase in it. I'm not suggesting take any money away from the state, because doing that puts even further pressure on our budget with the income tax being eliminated, all of which goes to the state, none of which stays local. And then there are some states, as you well know, have local and county income taxes. All of our neighboring states have layers of local and county and in Louisiana parish taxes. That's why they all have an average of 9.5% sales tax, whereas ours is 7%. All in. We're stepping aside for a break right now. We got half an hour left of middays in the Element Wealth studio, and it's Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on
SuperTalk Mississippi.
Who draws the crowd and plays so loud, baby? It's the guitar man. Who's gonna steal the show? You know, baby, it's the guitar man. He can make you love, he can make you cry. He will bring you down and he'll get you high. Something keeps him going miles and miles a day to find another place
That's David Gates and Bread, Guitar Man. The Dow's turned negative. BJ and Brandon says, I just traveled from Florence to Collins, and there were more out-of-state tags going south on 49 than there were Mississippi tags. Let them help us pay our state taxes. Well, they would be paying excise taxes, of course, for fuel if they fill up or purchase fuel in Mississippi, and that would stay with the state. But, you know, the other point is, if they stop and buy stuff, they're paying sales taxes, and that's going to the state coffers as well. Ron from Madison says, at least the sales tax, everyone participates, whereas property tax, only people who own property participate. Yeah, look, as Rhino says, trying to please everybody here ain't possible. You're trying to thread a needle that is infinitesimally smaller than the thread itself, the hole in it. It's just impossible.
It is possible.
Okay.
But not within the confines of the current governance we enjoy, and certainly not at the behest of those we have put into power. The people that would have to make the decisions to go home and not have that much power are the people in power at the current moment.
Oh, boy, is that ever true?
They could all vote themselves into obsolescence, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah. I agree. Share the story you just shared with me off the air about a father and his children and interviewing for a job.
Yeah, this one's been bugging me for the last couple of days because it's a perfect example of how wimpy we have become in this country and how worried about the worst possible scenario instead of looking at the reality of what usually happens. In Augusta, Georgia, a 24-year-old single dad was arrested because he left his 10-year-old kid in charge of his 6-year-old and 1-year-old at the play place at the Mickey D's while he went next door for a job interview.
Yeah, I think the arresting is a little too extreme, honestly. I get it that it's a dangerous situation to put a 10-year-old in charge, but it is a McDonald's, and they're accommodating for kids. Nobody would say, "Hey, wait, kids over there." So, and you got to applaud the guy for trying to lift himself up and go to work. You don't know what the circumstances are, right? Could have lost a job. Obviously had enough disposable income to carry his kids up to the McDonald's, and I'm sure fed them as well.
I mean, it would be one thing if he left them at the Mickey D's to go to the bar.
Yeah.
Or he left them at the Mickey D's to go shack up with somebody.
I agree.
Or he left them at the Mickey D's to go get high. But no, he left them at the Mickey D's to go to a job interview in the building right next door.
Yeah, I think maybe a little talking to, slap on the hand would make sense there. Hey, you know, you got to be careful here with leaving your kids unattended by an adult. I get that. I think the arresting's a little extreme. I really do. I mean, good grief. How much better off would the country be if we had more people that find themselves in that situation and are trying to fix it by going to work? Right? All too many of them said, "Oh, no, I'm entitled to just sit back and smoke dope and eat Doritos and play video games and let the government take care of me." And that's what is plaguing our society. Wow, that's incredible. Really is. Kind of sorry to see that. You may have seen some reports. It just came up on the screen here in the studio. I caught this yesterday. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin used to serve in the U.S. House, also was a candidate for governor of the Empire State of New York. Honestly, didn't get defeated by a whole heck of a lot, especially in the state as blue as New York. But he says, upon taking this position, that the Biden administration, quote, EPA was absolutely being used to push out this green slush fund to their friends. I've got no doubt. And some of the crazy stuff they had going on, it's just a dead-gum piggy bank for the green nutcases under the auspices of protecting the environment. It's absolutely untrue, and I was pleased to see Zeldin expose all this and put an end to it more than anything, which is important. But there's no doubt that under the Biden administration and Democrats in general, that the whole purpose of government was just to serve their ideological whims. I mean, it really had nothing to do with secondarily delivering services to the people who elect them and pay taxes for said services. At what age do you stop paying property tax? You don't. In Mississippi, you get an additional exemption, reduction, at age 65, but the tax ensues. It's not really related to your age. There's been a lot of folks who've said they ought to exempt everybody over 65. Man, I'm all for that. Again, just keep in mind that means loss of that revenue to school districts, to counties, and to cities to some extent. That's where property taxes go.
But if you do that, then the argument would be made, well, why not everybody under the age of 30 so they can actually own a home?
Yeah. I mean, where does it stop? I agree. So it really comes down to, you have to agree you've got to have some amount of money to run the government at all levels. The question is, what should the government be doing? That's what's up for debate. How much money do they need to do it? And how should they collect that money? What should be the source of those funds? But as we just shared with you, property taxes at school districts, that's primarily where they go. That's the local portion of a school's funding on top of the money they receive from the state. That's $6,900 per student from the state. And then, of course, you got county. It is the source of revenue for county. So all the roads and bridges and other infrastructure, that's the primary function of county governments. You've got some law enforcement as well there with sheriff's departments, et cetera. But it's primarily infrastructure, and that's where your property taxes go. Because the excise taxes you pay for fuel, that goes to the state. That's for state roads and also our match with the federal government. Let's see. But you're okay, Dave says, but you're okay with school choice, which would then take that property tax to another school district. Nope, not true. Not true. Not true. Not true. I don't know, man. Sometimes, and this is why people ask sometimes, why do you talk about the same thing? Because obviously this person's never heard us talk about that, which has only been like 200 times. Not true. In fact, the issue with school choice is that the receiving school who would take in a student, enroll a student from another district, would not receive the property taxes, the district taxes paid by the student's family in a different district. Even if they rent, there's a property tax component to the rent paying by the landlord. However, school choice legislation, open enrollment that was introduced this past year, HB 1435, which did not survive this session, it included a provision that would have covered the additional costs associated with educating a student from another district with respect to the local portion. There was a $5 million fund set up in the bill for that purpose. So it's absolutely not true. Right over that, it's accurate description of the way that works. Just want to make sure that because I know this individual is argumentative about that to some extent. Counties also fund rural fire departments outside the municipal limits. Well, I just said law enforcement and other services. I failed to mention fire departments. I get it. The only point I'm trying to make is virtually the sole source of revenue to counties is property taxes. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Go look at your property tax bill. School districts, county, cities. That's the way it works in Mississippi. It's the way it works in most states, to be honest with you. Let's see. What else we got? Something I saw on the C-Spire text line. Let's see. Mose says, starting July 1, don't the county start getting part of the diversions? No, Mose, and that was the point. In the original House bill, yes, because there was a 1.5% additional sales tax included in that bill. Okay, and that total 1.5% would stay with the city where the transaction occurred or the county, brand new. But that bill didn't pass. No additional sales taxes, thus no diversion to counties. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
So I want to apologize to Dave. I apologize because I let my threshold get me. And the background here is that, you know this is a common objection from the public school establishment. And I've been fielding it and addressing it for well before I started hosting the show. And so I apologize. There you go, Dave. I really do. I didn't mean to sound condescending or argumentative or even claim that you were being but it's a big misunderstanding and a lot of misinformation associated with that issue. And again, it is a common objection used. And look, there are some situations where, and I didn't mention this, some situations as in other states that have these programs, where the student is responsible for paying tuition, if you will, right, to cover the local revenue associated with the student should they come from another district. Because the theory being, well, you're paying taxes in District A, but you're going to school in District B. District A is keeping that revenue even though they're not educating you. And you're going to District B. You got to pay us for that since you don't live here. So, and you can structure it any way you want. I mean, it's just a matter of what can be enacted into law. The program that was considered this year, again, as I said, set up a separate fund, $5 million by the legislature that districts could tap to cover the additional cost associated with a transferring student. The additional cost is not being included with the transferring student for the local portion. The state portion follows the student. So the transfer or school, the home school district, loses the money because they don't have that student to educate. It goes with the student across the district lines to the new district. But the local portion stays with the transfer or district. The transferee district, the receiving district, could apply for some funding to cover that local cost component. So Dave says that what do we do with homeschooling, public money going to private schools? Those are other forms of school choice, other aspects of a robust school choice program. That's been proposed as well in the state of Mississippi. It's never passed. It's passed in 15 states, including all the states that border ours. Alabama this year passed robust universal school choice. Tennessee did as well. Shortly after taking office as governor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas, former press secretary for President Trump in his first term, she made that a top priority and got that passed. Like within a couple of months, as I recall, Rhino, of being in office as the governor of Arkansas. Robust school choice, universal. Even private school students have access to the funds associated with their public education. So Dave just points out, he asked for that. He says, I see other problems. I guess the question I would ask is, or all their other states, they got it wrong? Because it's not causing problems. The only one that had a little bit of problem was Arizona. The universal school choice program they passed did cause some budgetary problems, and they had to do some rework of that. But Iowa, for example, and Governor Kim Reynolds there is fantastic. Tennessee, again, just enacted it. Alabama just enacted it. Arkansas. Florida's had it for a very long time. There's some other states Wyoming, right. That's one that just recently, you recall, we talked about that on the show. There are 15 total. Even purple New Hampshire is strongly considering. The president, of course, big time supports school choice. He's a proponent. And so does his current education secretary, Linda McMahon, who's working herself out of a job and happy about it. That's what happens when you put people in positions like that aren't not faceless career bureaucrats looking to earn their fortune somehow, even illegitimately, right? By serving in these government roles. Linda McMahon doesn't need money.
But you got to stay in the machine long enough to get your name and face known enough so that your wife or your girlfriend or your kids or your cousin's uncle's dog walker can become the head of some NGO.
Right.
That is an NGO in name only, because the second they stop getting any money from the government, they have to shut their doors.
And Musk is about to blow the lid on that. So here's another common argument on school choice, or actually property taxes, not so much school choice. Senior citizens don't have school-age children for the most part. They shouldn't have to continue paying those taxes. Well, what about single people that never had kids? So here's the argument against that, is that only because senior citizens paid property taxes when you were working were your property taxes at the level they were. If the prior group of senior citizens that were senior citizens when you were working did not pay property taxes, your taxes would have been much higher. This is just simple math. You got to have so much to operate the school district. The question and the issue we should be focused on is, what does a good, effective school model, school operations, K-12 model look like? How much money do we need to fund that, and where should it come from? That's the question. If we said no property taxes, okay, well then it's got to come from somewhere else. We're coming right back with Lieutenant Governor Hosemann.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. Haven't been home in a year, oh Lord. I hope she holds on.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We are in the Element Well studio. Hour 3, the afternoon program, a portion of the program is now live. We're pleased to welcome now the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Mississippi, Governor Delbert Hosemann. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, Gerard. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you as well. So, we were just talking about the current session. We're winding it down here right now. So, are we going to get a budget?
Here's hoping. We'd like to get one. So many people depend on this budget. You know, our teachers are signing their contract for next year. Principals try to get them to sign up here in April, so they'll know if they got to go recruit somebody to teach math or something. So that's going on. All of our others, we have many other people who base their budget in community colleges, universities, you pick it. There are about over 100,000 people that work in city, county, and education, and in the state government. The state government's actually shrunk on purpose since I started. We started with 26,000. We're down to about 24,000 employees now, and we hope to shrink it further by attrition and retirement and whatnot, just paying better attention on how many people we need to do the job. But there's about over 100,000 that are in the education sphere, the county, the cities, all that public stuff. So they all got to be assume what their return's going to be and what they're going to be paid this next year. And we have everything from Child Protective Services. We're trying to get more lawyers to try to get kids adopted faster. To the governor wants a uniform youth court. We're trying to get that done as well, and that's having troubles among my friends at the House. That allows for kids to get adopted quicker, but more importantly, to be having addressed when they have more minor crimes, if there are such things as minor crimes, they would be addressed quicker by a judge, and possibly we have these challenge places that they can go and maybe get their feet back under them and get them out of a bad environment. basically divert them from more crime later on, in which we have to do more serious stuff, and they become more to the state. So there's a lot of things that go on with this budget, and it's not just how many cars you got. We cut those down too, but there's a lot that goes on with it. And I'm hopeful. As you know, we struggled. We were supposed to have it done, last Saturday, and we didn't make it. The Senate was there, the House left. So
I'm looking at the LBO report from last year, and our budget came in at $7,030,000,000.
That's
so just
correct.
under 7.1. What figure are you looking at this year? Do you have a feel for that?
We're
at this
down
point?
a little bit from our projection. We projected out as in the 7.5, 7.6 range, 7.5 billion or 7.6 billion range.
Well, that's the spending. That's what I'm talking about.
The spending,
7.1 billion, 7.03.
Yeah, that's what we anticipate spending. It will be very close to that on the spending side. On the revenue side, we had projected somewhere in the 7.5 to 7.6, and we're slightly below that. But you know something, Gerard? I'm glad you said that. We raised $7 billion. That's we've cut taxes, as you know. We can talk about those. We've cut taxes about every year I've been there. We're going to cut them again, just cut them again. But we get $7 billion. The federal government gives us $14 billion.
Right.
Now, that's like you running this TV station not knowing where two-thirds of your revenue is going to come. And let me tell you what's come home to roost. And you and I both have talked about this privately before. Yesterday at 4:59, day before yesterday now, I guess, at 4:59, the Department of Education in Mississippi was informed that $190 million of their funds had been frozen. Now, these were funds that were used for various education projects. Some of them were construction projects in schools that are ongoing now. Schools that had taken money from the government on an extension of the CARES Act and whatnot to be able to use these funds. Now that's $190 million that we were going to get that we don't get. Now people got paid with that. There'll be people that don't make paid, so they got to go get another job. There's no guarantee they'll get another job or even stay in state. Schools were redoing their stuff, and in my position, I was always been even if the federal government cuts some money, I'm still liable to these contractors and stuff. We need to pay those people. They're Mississippians, and we're not going to leave them on the lurch like this. So that's $190 million. This week we received from the Department of Health. They had frozen $120 million of Department of Health's budget. So you knew the numbers real well. You're real smart about that. So you can see what's adding up here. And they think they've got another $100 million that's come out of Doge. So just back, you and I talking, there's $500 million sitting out here that we have been notified or been going to be notified that is not going to be coming. Now, some of that is people that we won't be able to do. Some of it is working with teaching kids how to better read. We've been very successful lately in improving our education system. We still got a ways to go, but we've been making improvements on that. Some of it is that. Some of it's school construction. Some of it's health department matters, where they were building out health departments in the various counties, take care of better care of people at the county health department level. So all of that stops. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily we owe that money. We will owe some of those funds, but it means money stops coming into this state, which is going back to this budget.
We're too reliant on the federal government. You know that. Absolutely. I know that. We all and we hadn't gotten to Medicaid, and that's in the $8 billion range for the federal government against our billion.
Right. And we're still
somewhere in there.
We're short somewhere around. They tell us about $200 million this year short on Medicaid. If they don't do anything,
that's what the
Washington,
division of Medicaid is saying, without making any changes or expanding Medicaid, just base standard Medicaid.
That's correct.
And that's going to keep going up.
That's correct. And so when you're talking, and this is a good discussion, people don't get a chance maybe if you're driving along to listen a little bit about this, but we are at the whim and caprice of the federal government on our budget. Everybody just needs to know that. We have a $30 billion budget. There's special funds for some of this other, but twice as much money as we pay taxes comes into this state for various and sundry other matters, from Medicaid being the largest, but a number of other matters, two of which I just outlined to you at the Department of Education and Department of Health. Now, they haven't touched our Child Protective Services yet. They haven't touched mental health. They haven't touched several other organizations, our Health and Human Services Department. They haven't touched any of those yet that we know of. But It's like the mama used to say, I can hear the train coming down the track. So that's kind of where we are.
Well, and the reality is of the money the federal government, because I have done the math on this, the money that every dollar that goes out of the federal government, with the exception of Social Security and Medicare, which are a little bit separate deals, 40 cents of every dollar we borrow.
That's right.
Borrow. It's insane when you think about it. So
Absolutely.
All this money that's coming our way at the state, 40 cents of it is borrowed. So we're on the hook for it as the debtor, essentially, for this.
That is exactly right. There's two things I want to talk to you about that. First is you're exactly right about that. We spend more on interest right now than we do on defense.
Trillion.
So everybody just try to think a little bit. More than ships and planes and all that stuff you see us going into space on, we spend more on interest than we do on any of that. Okay, that's number one. It's not sustainable. Unless the interest rate goes down, there's no way for us to balance the budget in the country. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I figured this was coming. You and I are business people. We've been around. So we've been paying off the state's debt. We'll pay off another $400 million of state's debt. We haven't borrowed any money. And I'm not borrowing any money.
Where do we stand now? About $8 billion, though, right?
Oh, no. We're down about $4 billion. We were like 5 something. We're down about 4.5 or 4.6, and we're going to about 3.6 or 3.8.
I'm off on that.
Yeah,
right.
so we've been paying. You're off because we've been paying off debt.
$400 million, right, in our appropriations last year.
Yeah,
$400 million of expenses of interest on our debt last year.
Yeah,
right?
interest, and we paid off principal of $400 million. We paid interest as well.
So that's just basic retiring on the schedule of the debt and not taking out any new debt.
That's correct. That is the key. Before, when the Democrats had this, what they did every year was they borrowed money to make the budget work. We've not been doing that. We've been paying it out of the revenue that we receive from the taxpayers. I knew this part was coming. Our rainy day fund's got $700 million in it, and our wind pool fund for the coast has got $400 and something million in it. We have been saving for a rainy day. And the president has been real clear with us when we hired him. We're going to have some short-term pain here, and that's happening. That's happening to the Department of Health. It's happening to the Department of Education. It's going to happen to the other federal grants.
Total debt service last year, I'm looking at it now, $418 million in the state of Mississippi. So that's principal and interest. Total debt service, which is a significant line item. Like the fourth biggest line item probably in the whole budget behind education, Medicaid, corrections.
Yeah, well, the biggest item is retirement. But
well, that's not in the general fund, as you know, so I'm just looking at the general fund spending.
No, we have retired that debt down, and I intend to, hopefully this next year as well, if we hang on one more year, we'll be able to retire another $400 million. And we're getting ourselves in position to where if we have to borrow money, we'll be able to do so. We're basically paying down our credit card. That's the way you want to look at it.
Yeah. So the question I have, though, still that I'm curious about, and maybe it's too early to tell, but I get that we're reducing the ranks, the number of employees, and that's been going on for some time. But the question is, are we reducing expenses? So if we're just reducing headcount, but our spending's staying the level or going up, we're really not achieving anything. To speak of, except putting more pressure on PERS.
Well, that's true. We are reducing the individual body count, but we've also increased our expenditures on education, particularly on 2 big tranches over $400 million. That's where the increases is coming.
We got a break. If you can hang around,
I'll stay one more, and then we're in session, so I have to get back and work.
Lieutenant Governor Hosemann.
Hello, I'm Gary Jolly from the Tractor Store. LS Tractor understands your passion for the land, and just like you, LS Tractor is committed to excellence and superior products. LS Tractor comes with a long list of standard features that are unmatched by other brands and backed with the LS commitment to provide exceptional customer service and satisfaction. You get a lot more for your money with the LS Tractor. Come to the Tractor Store in Richland to experience the LS difference. The Tractor Store in Richland.
Catfish, hush puppies, and fried dill pickles. For a flipping good time, come down to Cock of the Walk.
Proud to be celebrating our 45th anniversary. Voted the best catfish, cornbread, and sweet tea in Mississippi. And don't forget the greens and coleslaw, too. Introducing our new entree, fried and grilled shrimp, with locations on the Reservoir, Pocahontas, and 1 mile from the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, Tennessee.
For a flipping good time, come down to Cock of the Walk.
I like chicken. I like fish. I like hush puppies.
I love it. Catfish is excellent.
For a flipping good time, come down to Cock of the Walk.
For over 30 years, Heron Gear Lexus has proudly served Mississippi with one simple mission: do things right from the start. From the moment you walk through our doors, you'll experience excellence. We're not just about luxury cars. We're about building trust and relationships. We strive to maintain the finest dealership network in the industry, treating every customer like a guest in our home. At Heron Gear Lexus, it's not just service, it's a promise. Discover the difference. Heron Gear Lexus, where luxury meets integrity.
Why don't you mind your own business?
Mind my own business? What's that supposed to mean?
No, I was just thinking about all of the news of tax changes, insurance changes, regulations that are being passed down to business owners. I don't have the time to keep growing and to keep up with changing payroll regulations.
I know. It seems like all I do is handle employee-related problems.
You know, I hear People Lease can help.
How can they help?
People Lease can handle our payroll, taxes, employee benefits, and workers' compensation. They even offer an affordable and customizable 401k program and a 24/7 online human resources support center for all my HR needs.
Think of all the time we'll save letting People Lease handle our payroll and benefits administration. I'll be busy growing my business and letting People Lease take care of the rest.
Sounds like a good business plan with People Lease.
Let People Lease mind your business so you can mind your own business. Call now, 601-987-3025. That's 601-987-3025. Or visit freepayrollquotes.com for your free quote.
Since 1910, the University of Southern Mississippi has been dedicated to preparing students for success. We are a community-engaged Carnegie R1 university, earning distinction as one of the nation's leading research institutions. From pioneering work in polymer science and engineering, ocean science, and more, to leading the way in a broad range of disciplines like cybersecurity, education, nursing, and business, Southern Miss produces graduates who are ready to make an impact in the real world and ready for life.
No filibuster, just everything you need to know to start your day smarter. Mornings with Richard Cross on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
It's so awesome!
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
God started to realize that eternal fate has turned its back on here. It's 2 a.m. Figure it's gone. The sun's still warm.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann is our guest. All right, so we got to talk about probably the highest profile legislation of the whole session, and that's the tax bill that got passed into law last week. I mean, the cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows there's at least in the opinion of some, there's a drafting error. Now, Senator Daniel Sparks says you could actually argue about that error, whether or not it was an error or how it would be interpreted, I should say that way. And you lawyers that you do math sometimes different than the rest of us do.
I said when the governor signed the bill, I went back to the Bible, which is always a good go back to. I said, let he who has not had the first typo cast the first stone. So,
I think that's all true. I think the surprise here, with all due respect, Governor, is that how many people missed it.
No joke. We had state agencies, we had the drafters, we had the conference board, we went through conference committee, we went through all the Senate, outside people, actuaries. I can tell you, it was like instead of saying 85%, they put in 0.85, and there you are. So we have sent down to the House a corrections bill to correct that typo, which is what it was, and they've informed me that they may not sign that. We'll have to wait and see. The session's not over. We'll see if they'll do that or not. And if not, then we got one thing I can tell you is our tax cuts are good through 2031. So we're all on ground to that, and then sometime in the next 5 or 6 years we'll have to figure out the typo.
Well, and already we've got income taxes declining through the bill we passed in 22. I've talked about it on the show today.
You're right about that. We're cutting taxes when we hadn't finished cutting taxes the last time.
So we're in the 4.4 rate this year, 4.7 last year, 5 the year before. We'll be 4 next year. But then over the following 4 years, we go down to 3.
That's correct.
So if you looked at 24 as a baseline for revenue, where we had a 4.7 rate, we're going to 3 in 6 years in 2030. I mean, you can do that math there. That's a 40% decrease.
That is correct.
In the tax rate. Are you concerned about how that would affect revenues?
Always. We did our projections based upon a growth factor, which we anticipated has been running anywhere from 2 to 3%, and the government has been running about 3% on average. So we anticipated a growth rate of 3%, and we obviously, quite frankly, have to hold our expenses close to where they are. We can't be jumping up a lot. So if we hold our expenses down, that gap period ought to be able to absorb the amount of increased income and the lowering and the making sure we don't raise our expense side. That should meet the requirements, and according to our projections, it would, based on that anywhere from 2.1 to 3% growth in regular inflation growth. So and I know the governor has announced yesterday that we had the second fastest growing GDP state in the country.
The question is, how does that translate into revenue for the state? Because if you're cutting the tax rate, you might be increasing income.
If we're getting $7 billion and it goes up 3%, that's $210 million a year.
Oh, I get it. And so what I'm saying is, if your primary
that equals a tax cut, basically.
Well, we've got right. So we're covering the decrease in revenue with the surplus. So essentially, we're aligning the income tax rate with that.
That's correct.
But we're going to get to a point where the only source of revenue we're going to have is sales taxes.
Well, we cut the grocery tax too. You remember that? That's $127 million.
Right.
So you have to put that in your numbers.
But unless this cut of income taxes translates into an increase in consumer spending, which generates sales taxes, we're going to have to do something else, I fear, to make ends meet. And that may be we have to cut substantially.
I don't
spending.
know about our projections are, and I'm serious about this. We were real comfortable through 2030, looking at where we were, what we were, what the state economist was doing, what the national government was telling us, and all the players that were there. We felt really comfortable about that. That's why we put a trigger in beginning in 31.
Right.
That you could go up only if you had so much money earned in excess of the amount you expended. So that's why we put the trigger, and that's why the trigger was there to protect us from just this.
But we don't have that now.
Well, we got something.
Effectively, we don't have that.
I don't know. Depends on who you talk to. We got a trigger, but how you interpret it is another matter. Well, that'll work its way out over the next several years. But I felt comfortable that in the next 3 to 4 years, as we have Amazon, we have all these other companies coming in here and increased employment. I think our education system is the key to that. Community college system, all the things that are working well for us should generate more money. We should have more people, and we should have more spendable income. And that, of course, solves, as the governor is proud to say, a good, healthy job with $75,000 or $85,000 a year solves a lot of problems.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Provided they go out and spend money and generate sales taxes.
I don't think Mississippians have trouble with that. we can spend the money if we can earn it. If we got a good chance to earn it, we'll be able to spend it, I think.
I got you. Well, we'll see where that goes, but it looks like we're on a path to get that done.
That's correct.
Now, historically, you hadn't been a big fan of cutting the income tax or eliminating the income tax.
It wasn't that I wasn't a fan. I had the same questions that you just gave me. I said, all right, guys, we're going out here and we're going to say we're going to cut this out over the next 10 or 15 years. And I remember 15 years ago, what was a top stock? Well, like GE. Well, it's gone. You start going back. I said, things change. Economics change. We're on the cutting edge for a lot of our stuff. Automobiles, the president's talking about putting tariffs on those. There are a lot of things that are evolving in Mississippi. Are we sure that we can go out? And I wasn't sure.
Right.
Not that I don't want to eliminate the income. I don't want people to pay any taxes, but we need to do that to run the government. But what I was concerned about was that we not do this without some type of trigger, that some kind of bumper for as we got further out into oblivion. Like when you ran your companies, did you do a 15-year projection?
Not 15, 5.
Yeah.
That's about as far as I can see down the road.
And 5.
Wall Street wants 10, and they want to know where every penny in and out. It's impossible.
Impossible to do. So I had the same thing with the state. We're a $30 billion business, so I needed to figure out where we're going to be in 5 years and 10 years. So I felt real comfortable about the 4 or 5. And the elimination of the income tax is a positive thing, an economic positive thing for Mississippians.
Agreed.
And we wanted to be able to say we were the only state that's ever done that. We're the fastest, our biggest increase in education education. We've got a lot of positive things going. So that was another one to do. And as long as we are careful about it as we go forward, that would be fine, and we'll be more of a consumption-based sales tax.
Education, as you know, comprises about 54% of total general fund spending. And so anytime I think about cutting spending, I always look to education as an area. Is there some opportunity there?
No.
No way to cut that. School district consolidation, is that a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we worry about the individuals that are paying money for too many people working in the administration in schools, and I have concerns about that.
Sure.
There are two problems with that. One, I don't pay them. The state of Mississippi pays the teachers. The actual school board tells how much you're going to pay the superintendent.
That's right.
I don't have anything to do with it.
But we do send them roughly $7,000 a student.
Yeah, we do. And that $7,000 a student doesn't usually pay for the education of that child.
But don't they have control over how they spend that?
They do.
That's what I thought.
But that money would barely educate, so it doesn't cover this other tax money that they're getting for superintendents. They need to be more specific about that. They're doing better, particularly on things like technical training opportunities and welders
CTE.
and stuff, CTE stuff. They're doing better about that. But there is overhead in the public school system in Mississippi that could be reduced.
Okay.
Some are better than others, and you can look at the test scores and see
Can we cut Medicaid?
No.
Can we cut corrections?
Corrections...
Aren't we under scrutiny with the DOJ?
We are. We are out. We're not being sued. We won the suit on the mental health, which is rare. We're still under a Child Protective Services suit, but we won the mental health. We're not under a court order by corrections. We have improved our corrections. We've had to invest a good bit of money in making sure that the inmates, were getting decent food and whatnot. There was a riot the day I got hired. There was a riot up in Parchment. I went there at the time the riot was going on. So those things have calmed. We are spending a lot of money on corrections.
I asked about those three because, as you know, that's 70-something% of the total general fund spending.
And I think the federal court orders in Alabama cost them billions of dollars. So we're in a little bit of a defensive mode there. We want to make sure they're getting decent health care, that they're not in a cell that's 125 degrees. This is not supposed to be a country club, but we also have some human parts of that. And we just passed some legislation to allow them to work outside, like work in Greenwood and work in different places. So I'm very hopeful that the actual utilization of the people that are in prison in an outside activity gives them a growth for the future and lets them go forward.
The auditor says that we spend an outsized amount of money compared to some other states on casualty insurance on our properties and buildings. Have you looked into that?
I haven't. It's on my list for next year. I have done this in the private industry where we're upping our deductible amount, quite frankly, and I want to do that for the state.
Down.
That's exactly right. And so I anticipate we will be doing that next year, where we're looking where we may have a $50,000 deductible. I want to raise it to a $100,000 deductible.
I know you got to go. Appreciate you coming in.
Always good to visit. We covered a lot of topics in a short time.
We did. Appreciate it, Governor. Thanks for coming in.
Good to see you. Pray for everybody in the legislature, y'all. We're working hard.
We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
I come hard, I come up getting down. There's only three things for sure: taxes, debt, and trouble. Oh, this I know, baby.
We interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go.
This is huge news.
Huge news.
You need to listen to this.
MidDays with Gerard. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's MidDays. Several texts, and it's fully expected when you got the lieutenant governor who would be considered by many, I think, the way our system works in Mississippi, to be the most powerful lawmaker in terms of making laws, and that's because they are elected by the people. They're guaranteed to serve for 4 years, for a term. They preside over the Senate, which has fewer members. So you could argue that a vote in the Senate carries more weight than a House member just because of the numbers. I'm not saying they're more important. Don't get me wrong on that. You guys know what I'm saying there. It's the same thing at the federal level. A U.S. Senate seat, generally speaking, because you're voting on behalf of the entire state, representing the entire state. But the main thing is you're one of 100, whereas in the House you're one of 435. At the state level, you're one of 122 in the House, and you're one of 52 in the Senate. That's just the way our system works. And as a result, I'm simply making the point that the lieutenant governor, in general, could be considered as having the most power over legislation. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they shape or influence the agenda any more than does the Speaker of the House or the governor or members of the House. That's not the point. But just in terms of the just numbers. So, not surprising that we would receive a whole bunch of texts. And before I even read them, I just want to start by saying it's really hard, as Rhino knows, to look up and read those texts while you're trying to pay attention to what someone who is speaking as much as we did there, that exchange. I mean, that's a lot of content in a substantial content in a very compressed period of time. That's generally how it is with someone is at the high level as the lieutenant governor. So we're grateful for his time and that he spent 2 segments because we don't always get that. We're grateful for that. But when I'm sitting here, and I'm not making excuses, I'm just telling you how it is, just to preface, and trying to get as much content and as many questions and as much exchange and response from the lieutenant governor as possible in that very short period of time. And there are lots of other things that I want to know about as well, just as you guys do. And I get that. And also try to be respectful and not interrupt. A couple of times there, you probably noticed I felt like that I needed to because there was some other matters that I felt like we needed to discuss. So, hopefully that was good for you. I, too, come away with some outstanding issues, and I'll have to wait for the next time, honestly. Larry and Mize, and this is a common question, and Larry, I'm not going to ask that because I can answer that question for you, which is why you appointed Democrats to some of these chairmanships. And mainly there's 2 that I think are relevant, and that would be health, and that's Brian, and the Democrat senator, and Senator David Blunt, who I think might be on the program with us tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, I'm going to be remote. And he, the Democrat from the South Jackson area that heads the gaming committee. So the thing that astonished me, Larry, when I researched this a couple of years ago, was when this came up, was that there are more committees than there are senators. That was kind of shocking to me. So more committees than there are Republican senators. Let me correct that. And so you certainly could appoint, I guess theoretically, a Republican chairman to multiple committees. If not, you're going to have to dig into the Democrats simply because of the numbers. There are 36, last I checked, Republicans, 16 Democrats in the state Senate. But there are more committees than that. Now, some of those committees don't get a bill.
Those should be the ones headed by Democrats.
I agree, and they are. Many of them are. But there are 2 that are critical. That's gaming and health. That I would.
Both of those Democrats seem to do the bidding of somebody else.
Agree.
Other than the conservative people of Mississippi.
Agree. Now, let's be clear. Brian has been on that public health committee chairman for a while.
For far too long.
Even when Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves was presiding over the chamber, right?
Get him out of there.
Right. I agree.
He has done absolutely nothing to benefit Mississippi.
I agree. And
he's been up there longer than I've been alive.
And David Blunt, who heads gaming, I do feel like
second verse, same as the first.
I do feel like it's blocked mobile sports betting, and I'm hopeful he'll come on the program. Now, I will share. I don't think this is a problem. Rhino, he asked me yesterday when we were discussing PERS. He wants to give his perspective on it, and that's fine. I'm happy to have that discussion with him as well. But that's the question. Let's see. What is Thomas?
I mean, it would be different from a standpoint of, we can't overburden the chairperson of all. We can't give too many committees to too few senators. When you've said on the air they show up to the committee and they just sit there and, all right, all the ayes say yay, and they all sit there like a knot on a log while nobody's actually doing any freaking work, and the ayes have it, and they just go about their rat killing.
The one thing, to your point, that I've said before that I really would like to see change, and guys, you have to witness it. If you're not, you can dial in and watch, is the process. I just feel like it lacks when you got a chairman who has the ability to dispense of legislation, not even put it up for the committee, right? They can do that. So they have power in that. They can just kill it. And the other thing is, when they call for a vote of the members of the committee, which in my view is more important than when they vote on the floor, because most of the time when it comes out of committee and it gets to the floor, it generally passes. Would you agree? I mean, I haven't done the math and done the statistical analysis on that.
Part, yeah.
But because they've counted the votes, right? The speaker, the lieutenant governor, the committee chairman in particular, they've counted the votes. And they know if this thing's come out of committee that it's going to get passed or not. What I think would be important and valuable to the people of Mississippi is to see how these members vote in committee, because there's no record of that. Our law doesn't require it. And I'll share this again. I have before. The committee chairman puts the legislation up, and they've debated it and asked questions, and then it's okay, I'm calling for a vote. All in favor say aye, and nobody says a word.
Which is why I think it's ridiculous to say, well, you can't give too many committees to too few senators. It would just be too much work.
I agree.
Bull.
And then they'll say, okay, the ayes have it. Like, wait, nobody said anything. Am I right on this? You've watched this. You've listened to it. It's like, wait, nobody said anything. It just seems like we could do better than that, my view. I think we ought to have a required recorded vote in committee. You'd learn more about a member than you would on their votes on legislature that makes it to the floor. A bill that I have promoted and campaigned for this year is to end this deadgum preferential treatment in procurement. This voting for a mayor in the city of Jackson, unless they come in and change that policy, the city of Jackson will continue to flounder, because that breeds all the graft, all the corruption. It's the core reason why it's a failing city. Yet I try to get the legislature to pass legislation, because they can do that, to prohibit that practice at the municipal and county level. And they won't put it on the committee floor. It's bizarre to me. Like, so you support preferential treatment? It's crazy. I like the lieutenant governor, says the text line person here. I think he works very hard for the people of Mississippi. Sometimes I feel like he's very harshly criticized. When I ask questions about the criticism, I find myself under attack. Thomas in Greenwood thinks I'm getting hammered by PERS. Thomas, you say that like every day. No, nobody's hammering me from PERS. Are the PERS people concerned? Yeah, sure they are. They're concerned that they don't see the action they feel like that they should see to ensure that their benefits go on uninterrupted. I mean, would you?
I feel the need to repeat something I don't think I've said on the air in years.
Okay.
In fact, it might have been pre-COVID the last time I said this on the air, but social media is not real life. There are tons of people on social media who do nothing more with their miserable existence than dog cuss you for having a differing opinion. That's not real life.
Right. But, you know, you've seen the reports on this, how through the years as we've progressed, the huge part of our population that gains almost all of their news and information from social media. It's mind-boggling. And then you wonder, well, exactly how much of that's fact and how much of it's fiction, I don't know. Andy says, it looks like the income tax cut will give me an extra $36 a month I haven't figured my wife's, but be less than mine. I spend about $1,000 a month on groceries, $400 per month on gas. How's this tax cut the way it's arranged? So on $400 on gas, you'd have to figure out how many gallons. So that's what, 50 gallons or so. You would pay $5 a month is what it would amount to. We're coming right back for the final segment in the Element Mail Studios.
Hey, this is
Gerard Gibert. Going beyond the headlines, breaking down the stories that matter to Mississippi. Middays with Gerard on SuperTalk Mississippi.
I just want to follow up. I had lots of other topics to get to, and it's just hard within two segments, and try to prioritize the legislation that did pass and trying to get more information about the budget. I think, like you guys, many on our text line, I was a little surprised to hear the response to, is there a possibility of cutting education spending? The response was no. Now, what I believe is that there are opportunities to reduce overall spending, but not at the expense of the monies going into the classroom. And I fear we're headed again for a situation where our teachers and our teacher pay is going to lag. And I asked that question to Education Chairman in the House, Rob Robertson, yesterday. And remember what he said was, we're not exactly sure what the other states pay. I'd have to do a little research on that. I'm not sure if that's totally true. I do know it's extremely convoluted, and it would take some work. But bottom line is, that's a never-ending challenge. There's a shortage of teachers, and, pay dictates whether or not people enter the profession. And then if they do, if they're, looking to live a certain place, well, where money and compensation is secondary, that's a little easier problem to address. But if they're, seeking the highest pay they can for their services, that may cause a problem for the teachers that Mississippi is turning out of our schools. There was a question, are there any districts in Mississippi that charge tuition? And this is something I talked about earlier, when you have a public-to-public transfer from one district to another. Pretty sure that's at the discretion.
Yeah, if you can get the districts to agree that student can move from District A to District B, I'm fairly certain every district requires tuition.
I think it's at their discretion. I think they can waive it, if I'm not true. The school board can. Also, I think there's a formal program in place on the coast within Harrison County, right? They have kind of an agreement they worked out between themselves for that purpose. So there's a tuition component to that. So it's not an unusual situation in a school choice type program. Seems like they could drop the school tax portion from the property tax at age 65, because why should we still be paying for schools? And I just repeat that if you did that, that means that you would have paid lower taxes when you were working, because people over 65 were paying their share, which kept your taxes lower. And now you would expect people to work to pay higher taxes to compensate for the loss of the revenue you would have generated. So I mean,
if we really want to get up in arms about paying taxes we don't see any benefit from, I'm a single dude, so I'm paying taxes that go to schools to educate kids I don't have. I'm paying Social Security taxes to Social Security for everybody that's currently drawing down on it, and I'm convinced I'm not going to have any when I get to that age, because it won't be there. I mean, do we really want to start breaking down the brass tacks on what we're paying and what we're not getting? Or is everybody else just going to sit back and go, I don't want to pay any more than I have to, but we all got to pay something?
Well, the left in this country, by the way, thinks the people who pay the most taxes use the most government. That's their right. Therefore, they need to pay more because they're getting more government services. And I keep scratching my head on that one. But that's what they believe. Darren in Jackson says, Hosemann ticks me off. He seems to find ways not to pass conservative legislation. Let's see. Andy says, and let me add to that step up and be conservative. He was talking about doing the math on the savings he would receive as a result of the tax cut. Again, I would encourage you guys to do your own situation. Look at your math. If you're working and producing income, that's obviously, and it's subject to the income tax, it's going to produce a greater savings for you than if you're not. There's no doubt. But I think if you look at the gas excise tax increase, the grocery tax decrease, for most people, as you've said, I think it's a wash, probably a net small benefit. I think Mose did the math as well, sent us his situation, and it turns out it's a small benefit for him. How would schools be able to hire the amount of teachers needed to handle the incoming students? Talk about in a school choice situation. So legislation that's been proposed here, this is Casey from Summit in Mississippi, allows schools to determine their capacity and to only allow enrollment or to have discretion over enrollment or applications for enrollment from students outside of their district based on that capacity. If they're out of room and they don't have capacity, they wouldn't have to accept those students. And the bill this year, 1435, authored by Representative Jansen Owen, that's exactly what it included, is a provision for that. In fact, it compelled, as you required, every district to submit their capacity information at the beginning of the year so the legislature would have that on file. In other words, they don't just make it up as they go along on a case-by-case basis based on students, applying for enrollment there. Yeah, so folks are still a little astonished at the idea of the lieutenant governor saying can't cut anything in education. Larry and Mai says consumption tax is fair to everyone, but Larry, a lot of people griped about increasing the sales tax, and it would require a substantial increase in the sales tax to offset the loss of property tax and income tax. I'm for it too, but it would be substantial and not very popular. We're out of here today. Back with you again tomorrow down at the Trade Mart. Till then, stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.